Hey everyone, I'm AfterMoon Horrors. Before we dive into the story, I want to know, where are you watching from and what time is it for you? It's always fascinating to see listeners tuning in from different places. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy. Story 1. It started like any other holiday weekend. Spring had finally shaken the cold off the trees, and the town's festival was in full swing. I wasn't even supposed to go. I'd just gotten off a brutal double shift at the diner. But my younger cousin Ethan had begged me for days. My aunt was busy with her newborn, and he didn't want to miss the carnival rides or the fireworks. I figured one night wouldn't kill me. We packed up a thermos of lemonade, threw on our jackets, and made our way down to the park where the festival always took place. The field had been completely transformed. Lights strung across tents blinked in rhythm with the pop music blaring from the stage. Food stalls lined the walkway with the heavy scent of kettle corn and grilled meat. Kids ran wild with painted faces, cotton candy in hand, screaming as they chased each other between booths. Ethan was already tugging my hand, begging to hit the rides before the line got too long. I remember smiling. He looked genuinely happy, eyes wide with the kind of excitement only kids can have. It felt good to be the one giving him that memory. We started with the Ferris wheel, then the spinning cups, and then a small roller coaster they'd set up in the far corner of the grounds. Everything was bright and loud and chaotic, but harmless. At one point, Ethan handed me his hoodie and darted off toward a booth where he could win a toy if he knocked down enough bottles. I stayed close, cheering him on as he won a stuffed frog with a missing eye. He was thrilled. I remember thinking it was a perfect night. Until it suddenly wasn't. It was after the fireworks, maybe around 9:45 p.m., when I lost sight of him. We were walking back toward the exit, the crowd thick and restless, people already streaming out to beat the traffic. Ethan had seen a popcorn stand and asked if he could get one last snack. I said yes. I stood near a churro cart maybe 5 or 6 steps away from him. He handed the vendor a crumpled $5 bill, waiting eagerly for his bucket, and then he just wasn't there. One second he was tugging at the paper napkin, the next, gone. I thought he'd crouched down, maybe dropped something. I scanned around, calling his name over the noise. Nothing. I moved closer to the stand, leaned over, and asked the vendor if he'd seen where the little boy had gone. He shrugged and pointed to the crowd. "Wasn't he with you?" I nodded, trying not to panic. Maybe he saw something interesting. Maybe he wandered off. But deep down, I felt something tighten in my gut. I'd only looked away for a second, and in that second, Ethan had vanished. I searched for 20 minutes before I involved security. They were sympathetic at first. Told me kids get lost all the time. They had a loudspeaker announcement ready and asked me for a photo. I showed them the frog toy and his hoodie. I described his haircut, his freckles, the exact blue of his sneakers. A couple of staff members walked the grounds with me. They checked the restrooms, the lost and found booth, even the parking lot, but nothing. No one had seen a boy matching Ethan's description, not a single person. They told me to wait. They said sometimes kids turn up near the rides again, thinking their guardian would be there looking. I waited. An hour passed, then another. The crowd was thinning now, and the field looked less like a celebration and more like the aftermath of something abandoned. My heart was racing. I tried calling my aunt, but she wasn't picking up. I didn't want to worry her unless I had to. I kept telling myself Ethan would just appear, that he'd gotten distracted and wandered too far. But that feeling in my stomach wouldn't go away. Finally, I asked the staff to call the police. That's when everything got weird. The security supervisor started asking questions I didn't expect. "Are you sure he was with you when you entered the grounds? Do you have a photo of him from tonight? Did anyone else see him with you?" I blinked at them, confused and insulted. Of course he'd been with me. We'd ridden the Ferris wheel, we'd played games. I showed them the stuffed frog he'd won, even the popcorn he never got to eat. but they didn't look convinced. The police arrived just after midnight. I explained everything again, trying not to sound hysterical. One officer, a man named Ramirez, pulled out a small notepad and asked me to walk him through the evening step by step. I did. He asked to check my phone for pictures. I had taken one of Ethan in front of the roller coaster. I opened my gallery, and it wasn't there. I blinked. I scrolled. Nothing. Just selfies of me, blurry shots of carnival lights, and a video of the fireworks. Ethan wasn't in a single image, not even one. My stomach dropped. I knew I'd taken that photo. I remembered framing the shot, telling him to smile, reminding him to hold up the frog toy. But it was gone. Ramirez's face changed subtly, less concerned, more dark, cautious. He started asking if I'd been drinking, if I had a history of mental illness, if I was sure this kid even existed. That was the moment I felt a wave of something darker than fear, something close to rage. I told him to check with the vendors, the ride attendants. Someone must have seen us. They did go around and ask. Most of the workers said they hadn't seen a kid with me. One lady remembered selling popcorn to a boy, but she wasn't sure if he was alone. A man at the bottle booth vaguely recalled giving away a frog toy, but said it was a girl who won it. The ride operator for the Ferris wheel shook his head, said he only saw one person in my seat. I was shocked. I knew Ethan was there. I knew he had been there, but no one else remembered him. It was like he'd been erased. I was questioned for hours. My aunt finally picked up the phone around 3 a.m., groggy and confused. I told her what happened, expecting panic, but instead there was silence. Then she asked, "Who's Ethan?" I thought she was joking, but she wasn't. She insisted she only had a newborn, no older son, no 10-year-old boy named Ethan. I thought maybe she was in shock. I asked her to check his room. She paused for a long time, then quietly said, "There is no room, sweetie. What's going on with you?" That broke me. I hung up, hands shaking. I showed the officers our text thread. Ethan asking if I'd take him to the festival. They examined my phone, but those messages were gone too. All that remained were photos of lights and fried food and empty rides. The frog toy in my bag felt like the only real thing left. But even that didn't prove anything. No name tag, no receipt, just a half-sewn eye and fading green fur. I was released after sunrise. No charges, but they said they'd keep an eye on me. I went home in a daze, sat in my kitchen for hours trying to remember every detail about Ethan. His voice, his favorite cereal, the way he used to hum quietly while playing games. But the more I tried, the fuzzier it got, like someone was pulling threads from my memory, one by one. I opened old photo albums. He wasn't in them. School certificates on the fridge? Gone. It was like he'd been carefully and surgically removed from my entire life. And yet, I still had the frog. I didn't sleep that morning. I didn't eat either. I just sat at my kitchen table, staring at that stupid frog, as if its stitched, lopsided face would give me some kind of answer. It didn't. I even tried calling a couple of friends who had met Ethan before, but no one remembered him, not even my best friend Jen, who had once given him a ride home from school. She laughed nervously and asked if I was okay. "You're probably just sleep-deprived," she said. "You've been working non-stop lately, haven't you?" It was like the world was gaslighting me in unison. The next few days felt like walking through fog. I kept thinking maybe I was wrong, maybe I'd mixed something up, but every time I considered that, I'd feel a sharp, undeniable sting of memory. Ethan calling me Dee Dee when he was scared of the dark. Ethan crying over a scraped knee. Ethan holding that stupid frog toy and grinning with buttery popcorn fingers. These weren't hallucinations. They weren't dreams. They were memories. And I knew the difference. Still, I knew better than to call the cops again. They'd already put a note on my record, I'm sure. Instead, I started digging quietly. I went back to the festival grounds 2 days later. It was empty by then, just patches of dead grass and trash half blown into corners. I found the popcorn stand. It was gone. The churro cart, the bottle booth, everything. Gone. I walked to where the Ferris wheel had been. The outline of its base was still stamped into the dirt. I stood there for a while, hoping for something, anything. And then I saw the maintenance shed. Small, locked, but familiar. I remembered Ethan running behind it to chase a butterfly earlier that night. I don't know what I expected when I broke in. Maybe a piece of clothing or a dropped toy, but the place was almost empty, except for a few coiled wires and a plastic crate of leftover signage. I was about to leave when I noticed something taped to the inside of the door. A torn piece of colored paper. I peeled it off and turned it over. It was part of a carnival ticket. On the back, someone had scribbled something in pencil. Check video van. My pulse jumped. I didn't know if it meant anything, but I had to find out. Walked the entire fairground perimeter twice before I found the van. White, no license plate, parked behind a row of portable toilets almost hidden under a tarp. It looked abandoned. I knocked first. Nothing. The door was unlocked. Inside it was cramped and smelled like stale coffee, but the inside told a different story. Multiple monitors, all black now, connected to a closed-circuit system. I recognized the kind of setup from working in retail. Surveillance feeds. Someone had been watching the festival, maybe recording everything. My hands shook as I reached for the external drive wired to the back of the monitor stack. It was still warm. I didn't take the whole drive. I knew that'd make me look worse if I got caught. Instead, I grabbed the connector, plugged it into my phone with an adapter, and prayed. A series of folders popped up, all labeled by date and time. One of them was for the night Ethan disappeared. I opened it. Footage from every camera rolled in 20-second clips. I scanned through them. People walking, laughing, waiting in lines. Then I saw us. Me and Ethan. Clear as day. He was holding the frog. I was laughing. We were real. I exhaled so hard I almost cried. But I wasn't the only one watching the footage. As I sat there, copying the clips to my phone, I heard the crunch of gravel outside. Footsteps. Slow. Purposeful. I panicked, yanked the adapter out and ducked behind the front seat. The door creaked open and a man stepped inside. Tall, black windbreaker, gloves. He looked around, puzzled, and then walked straight toward the hard drive. When he saw it was disconnected, he cursed under his breath and yanked it free. Then he smashed it against the counter, once, twice, until it cracked. I held my breath, heart pounding so loud I was sure he'd hear it. But he didn't. He left without noticing me. I waited 10 full minutes before crawling out and bolting back to my car. That night I went home, locked every door and window, and sat on my couch watching the footage over and over. Ethan was there. No doubt. I wasn't crazy. But what happened next chilled me even more. At 9:43 p.m., 1 minute before I lost him, Ethan was seen talking to someone. A man. Not facing the camera, wearing a black windbreaker. Ethan handed him something, maybe the frog, maybe money. Then the man took his hand. Ethan hesitated, then followed. I froze the frame, zoomed in. The man's back was still to the camera, but his build, his posture, it looked a lot like the guy from the van. Same build, same hair, that couldn't be a coincidence. And Ethan didn't look scared, he looked uncertain, like he wasn't sure if he was doing something wrong. I didn't know what the hell this was. A kidnapping? Grooming? Blackmail? My skin crawled, but I knew I couldn't take this to the police, not yet, not with everything else erased. I had to find someone who could help, someone off the record. I reached out to a friend from college, Nadia, who had done freelance work in digital forensics. She owed me a favor. I met her the next morning and showed her the clips. She didn't say much at first, just transferred them to her laptop and ran some enhancement filters. "Where'd you get this?" she asked quietly. I gave her a vague answer. She didn't press. After a few hours, she paused a frame and pointed. "Look there." On the guy's wrist. "Tattoo. Partial." She zoomed in. 3 letters. WCT. It didn't mean anything to me, but it meant something to her. West County Transport, a private logistics and security company that had recently contracted seasonal workers for event security. According to Nadia, they weren't known for doing things by the book, underpaid, barely screened, and given way too much access at large events. We did some digging, and sure enough, they were hired to handle festival logistics. Their name wasn't on any public flyers, but buried in the vendor contract list from the city council. That gave us a name, a start, and after some searching, we found a photo of one of their contracted agents. Same guy, no question. I printed out the still of Ethan with the man. I mailed it anonymously to the police, along with Nadia's report. I didn't sign it. I didn't want them coming back for me. But I kept the frog. I kept the footage. I kept Ethan alive in every way I could. A week later, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. It said, "You should stop asking questions. He's better off where he is." I threw the phone away that same night, bought a new one, changed my email. But I didn't stop, not completely. Weeks passed. Then a month. One morning, I woke up to find a package at my door, no label. Inside was a flash drive. I plugged it in, half afraid it was malware. It wasn't. Just one file, a short video clip. Ethan, sitting on a bench, alive, clean, talking to someone behind the camera. "She was nice," he said, "but she wasn't my real sister. They said I'd be safer now." Then the screen went black. I couldn't breathe. I watched it again. And again. It wasn't recent, judging by the trees, but it was proof. He was alive. And he was never mine to lose. I don't know the full story. I probably never will. Was Ethan abducted? Hidden? Protected from something bigger than me? I don't know. I only know I loved a kid who vanished without a trace, and the world let him go without even blinking. But I remember him. I always will, and if he ever finds his way back to me, I'll be waiting, with that stupid one-eyed frog in my hands, just in case he still wants it. Story 2. A few years ago, I signed up for a spring retreat organized by my university's outdoor club. I wasn't exactly the nature-loving type, but I'd hit a rough patch after a breakup and needed something to pull me out of my head. The flyer promised quiet woods, a lake, group hikes, and a break from everything digital. It sounded peaceful, and more importantly, it sounded disconnected. I figured a weekend of fresh air wouldn't hurt. I packed light, left my phone in airplane mode, and boarded the van with 20 or so other students, most of whom I didn't know. The retreat was held at a nature preserve 2 hours from the city. As we drove deeper into the woods, signal bars faded from our screens, and someone jokingly said, "Perfect time to disappear." We all laughed, but I remember glancing out the window and seeing nothing but endless trees. No towns, no signs, no landmarks. When we arrived, a man in his early 30s greeted us at the main cabin. He wore hiking boots, khaki shorts, and a navy shirt that read, "Wilderwood Vol." He introduced himself as Chris and said he'd be leading the nature walks that weekend. Chris had that overly friendly energy you see in people who work too hard to seem approachable. He cracked dad jokes, learned everyone's name in 10 minutes, and had this habit of clapping his hands twice before giving directions. Most of us didn't think much of it. Some of the girls even thought he was cute, in a rugged, off-grid kind of way. He gave us a quick tour of the grounds, the main lodge, the fire pit area, the trail markers, and then assigned cabins by drawing names from a hat. I was paired with two girls from the biology department. The first evening was uneventful. We had dinner by the fire and played a few icebreaker games before Chris reminded everyone to be ready for the group hike at 9 a.m. sharp. He said the path was scenic, educational, and just slightly spooky, whatever that meant. The next morning, we assembled with our water bottles and day packs. Chris handed out trail maps, though he said we wouldn't need them since he'd be guiding us the whole time. The hike started fine. Birds chirping, boots crunching over pine needles, students chatting. Chris led from the front, pointing out mushrooms and tree types. But as the trail wound deeper into the forest, something shifted. The trees grew denser, and the group fell quiet. Chris stopped often to tell us random facts, some useful, others strange. At one point he pointed to a half-rotted log and said, "This is where a bear dragged its prey last spring. You can still smell the fear." We laughed nervously, but it wasn't funny. There was something off about the way he said it. Too detailed, like he'd been there. Later he pointed out a mossy boulder and said, "People used to leave messages here when they got lost. Only some made it back." By noon, I noticed we were nowhere near the route marked on the map. I whispered to one of the other hikers, a guy named Will, and he confirmed it. "We've passed the same tree twice," he muttered. I asked if he was sure, and he nodded. "I carved a tiny W on the bark earlier. It's right there." We both looked up at Chris, who was still leading confidently like nothing was wrong. That's when Will spoke up. "Hey Chris, are we still on the main loop?" Chris smiled, but didn't stop walking. "Yeah, just taking a slight detour. Trust me." Nobody questioned it out loud, but I could feel the unease ripple through the group. The terrain got rougher. More roots, less trail. A couple of people tripped, and one girl twisted her ankle. Chris finally called for a break near a rock formation that looked vaguely like a face. I remember sitting down and feeling the silence press on my chest. The air was heavy. No birds, no wind, just breathing and shifting and tension. Chris knelt beside the injured girl, wrapped her ankle in a cloth, and said something like, "Happens every trip, you'll be fine." While he was distracted, I pulled out my folded map and tried to match any landmarks. Nothing lined up. No formation like this was marked. No streams nearby like the one I heard trickling behind the rocks. I whispered to Will again. "How far do you think we are from camp?" He shook his head. "No clue. An hour? More?" I stood up and looked back the way we'd come. No trail. Just tangled brush and trees. That's when I realized we weren't on a detour. We were completely off the path. And Chris was the only one who knew the way back. I wasn't the only one catching on. A girl named Hannah approached Chris directly. "Hey, sorry, but I really think we should head back. Some of us aren't feeling great." Chris didn't even blink. "Already on it," he said. "We're looping back from the other side. You'll get to see the lake on the way." But there was no lake on the other side of the map. We followed him anyway, not knowing what else to do. That's when the weirdest part happened. Chris started asking us questions, but not normal questions. Strange ones. "Have you ever gone missing before? Would your family know if you vanished for a few days?" No one answered. It was too weird, too out of place. But Chris just kept walking like it was normal. I fell behind, motioning to Will to hang back with me. "We need to turn around," I whispered. "Something's wrong. He's not taking us anywhere near the camp." Will agreed. We waited until the group had walked ahead about 30 feet, then quietly slipped off the trail in the opposite direction, pushing through the trees. We didn't run. We didn't want to attract attention. But we moved fast. Branches scraped my arms. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. After 10 minutes of walking, we stumbled into a clearing and stopped cold. It was another trail, a real one, with a wooden sign marked "Exit Route pointing west." Relief washed over me. We started following it, and after another 15 minutes we finally saw the edge of the forest and the top of the main cabin. We practically jogged the last stretch. When we got there, we burst into the main office, breathless, and demanded to speak to whoever was in charge. An older woman in ranger gear came out and blinked at us like we were overreacting. "What's going on?" We told her everything. About Chris, about the strange detour, the weird questions, the lies about the map. Her expression shifted from confusion to concern in seconds. "Chris?" she repeated. "Are you sure that's his name?" We nodded. She went silent, then walked to a back room. When she returned, she held a printed sheet with headshots of current staff and volunteers. None of them were Chris. I felt like I was going to throw up. Will asked if maybe he was new. The woman shook her head. "No, we haven't added anyone to this program in over a year." Will and I stared at the ranger like we'd just heard her wrong. "What do you mean he's not in the program?" I asked, my voice sharper than I meant. She held the paper up again and pointed at each face slowly. "These are all our current volunteers. If you say someone named Chris took you out there, then we have a serious problem." Will and I looked at each other. I could tell we were both thinking the same thing. If that guy wasn't a volunteer, then who the hell was he? And more importantly, why was he leading college students off trail? The ranger moved fast. She called in another staff member, an older man with a walkie-talkie clipped to his belt, and told him to initiate recovery protocol. That phrase made my stomach tighten. She turned back to us. "How many people are still out there with him?" I counted in my head. 17, I said, "including a girl who hurt her ankle." She nodded and pulled out a laminated map of the reserve. "Can you show me exactly where you saw that rock formation? The one that looked like a face?" I did my best, circling the area near a dry creek bed. By the time a small search team had been assembled, 4 rangers, a medic, and 2 dogs, it was already close to 3 p.m. They asked us to stay at the lodge for questioning, but promised they'd keep us updated. Will and I sat in the corner of the dining hall, sipping tea neither of us really wanted. I kept trying to calm down, telling myself that maybe Chris was just some weird hiker pretending to be staff for fun, but that theory collapsed every time I remembered his questions. "Would your family know if you vanished?" No, this wasn't a prank. Hours passed. The sun started going down. Around 6 p.m., a ranger came back in, his boots caked in dirt, his face pale. "We found the group," he said. "They're safe. Shaken up, but safe." Relief washed through me like a wave. But then he added something that made my throat go dry. He wasn't with them. Chris. Whoever he was. He disappeared before they realized they were lost. Some of the students told the rangers that after the break at the rock formation, Chris had said he'd scout ahead for an easier route, and then never came back. According to the others, they'd waited almost an hour before realizing he wasn't returning. That's when they tried to retrace their steps and ended up going in circles. They were dehydrated, panicking, and completely disoriented by the time the search team found them. None of them had a map. A few didn't even have water left. And when they described Chris to the rangers, every detail matched what we'd said. Had a same windbreaker, same age range, same stupid hand clap. But the one thing they added was chilling. He carried no phone, no bag, and no ID. Nothing to prove he existed. The rangers filed an official report that night. They asked all of us to write statements while everything was fresh. I stayed behind to answer more questions, mostly about how we ended up on the real trail. I gave them every detail I could remember. At some point, I asked one of the rangers if they had security cameras around the lodge. He frowned. "Only a couple, mostly near the equipment sheds." Why? I told him Chris had met us at the lodge the first night. That should mean there'd be footage of him, something concrete, something to prove I wasn't losing my mind. But when they checked the footage the next morning, there was nothing. The entrance camera showed our van arriving, students unloading, and the retreat coordinator waving us in. But no one matching Chris's appearance was ever captured on the tape. Not at the entrance, not at the front steps, not even in the background. It was like he'd appeared from thin air and walked straight into our group without being seen. The ranger scratched his head. "He must have been smart," he muttered. "Probably waited until the blind spots, knew how to blend in. We've seen it happen before." That phrase stuck with me. We've seen it happen before. I asked what he meant, and he hesitated before answering. "There've been a couple of incidents over the years," he said quietly. "Not many, just enough to make us tighten policy. People slipping into programs they weren't part of, pretending to be guides or staff. Mostly drifters. One guy just wanted free food, another was mentally unstable. But this one," he shook his head, "this one feels different." He was too confident, too prepared. I nodded, the knot in my chest returning. Chris hadn't just stumbled into our group. He planned it. I went home the next day, but I couldn't shake the experience. I couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on school, couldn't stop replaying that hike in my mind. I even dreamed about it. Chris's voice, his weird questions, the way he'd smile just a second too long. A week later, I got a call from Will. He'd been doing some digging. Turns out, he recognized Chris from somewhere, an old online hiking forum they'd both used years ago. The guy went by the name Trail Ghost and posted long, detailed accounts of solo treks in areas no one else could confirm. Will sent me screenshots of some of the posts. One in particular made my blood run cold. It was a story, written like fiction, about a man who led a group of hikers into the woods and disappeared before they realized he wasn't a real guide. The final sentence read, "None of them remembered my name afterward, but I remember theirs." I didn't know what to make of it. Was he toying with people? Playing some twisted game? Or was it something even darker? Testing how far he could go. I sent the posts to the rangers. They took it seriously. Eventually the park filed an official alert for impersonation of staff, and neighboring reserves were notified. A police sketch was made from our descriptions. A few hikers came forward from other trails, saying they'd seen someone similar but couldn't be sure. Nothing stuck. No name, no ID, no trace. It's like he melted back into the woods. I kept thinking about the girl with the ankle injury. What if she'd been alone when she fell? What if Will and I hadn't turned back when we did? We were lucky. Stupidly, blindly lucky. I still hike now, but not alone. I check every staff badge twice. I never ignore gut instinct. And whenever someone leads a group and starts clapping their hands to get attention, I freeze for just a second. Chris is still out there, maybe watching another group, maybe blending into another event, maybe waiting. But I'll never forget what he asked us on that trail. "Would your family know if you vanished for a few days?" Think about that a lot. And I've made sure now they would. Every time I leave, someone knows where I'm going. Always. And as for Chris, wherever he is, whatever his real name is, I hope someone recognizes his face before he finds another group to vanish with. Because the next time, someone might not make it back. Story 3. Back when I was 22, I decided to take a break from everything. School, work, social media, and spend a few days camping with 3 close friends. We were all burnt out from midterms and part-time jobs and just needed a weekend away. Nothing too crazy, just sleeping bags, a cooler of snacks, and the kind of conversations that happen when you're off the grid. Our friend Cassie had a cousin who owned a small patch of private land a few hours out, right near the edge of a protected forest. No campsites, no fire rings, just open land, a sloping meadow, and a thin tree line. It sounded perfect. The 4 of us, me, Cassie, Jude, and Sarah, packed light and left on a Friday morning. The drive was long, mostly highway at first, then winding back roads that looked like they hadn't been repaved in years. We stopped for gas at a weird, half-abandoned station where no one spoke much English, and I remember thinking that would be the weirdest part of the trip. I was wrong. We reached the land just before sunset and set up our tents in the middle of the meadow. No one else around for miles. We had the place to ourselves. The first night was honestly great. We made a fire from the logs Cassie's cousin had left, ate microwave burritos we'd heated on foil, and played music from Jude's old speaker until it died. Then we talked. About life, relationships, people we were tired of pretending to like. It felt good, freeing. We turned in around midnight. Our tents were small, 2 people in each. I was with Sarah, and we both passed out fast. No weird sounds, no creeping shadows, just open sky and quiet wind. I slept better than I had in months. The next morning we cooked eggs on a mini propane stove and decided to hike into the woods nearby. There wasn't a marked trail, but the tree line wasn't too thick, and Jude was convinced he could navigate us back using a compass and gut feeling. Spoiler, his gut was mostly wrong. But getting lost for an hour wasn't the weird part. It was when we came back and found something new near our tents. A black camera, a cheap digital one, covered in dust like it had been buried or forgotten, but definitely placed there, sitting in plain view on a flat rock near the fire pit. None of us brought a camera, not even a GoPro. We were using phones for photos and videos, and they'd all been in our tents. Jude picked it up and turned it over. "No cracks," he said. "Someone left this here. It wasn't here when we left." Cassie asked if maybe it had been in someone's bag and just fell out, but we all shook our heads. It wasn't ours. That much was certain. It was old, too, early 2010s style, battery placed, no Wi-Fi. When Jude opened the back, he found a small memory card still inside. That's when we really got curious. We argued about whether we should look at it. Sarah wanted to leave it alone, said it felt wrong. Cassie insisted we should check it. What if someone had been missing and this was a clue? Eventually, curiosity won. Jude had a micro SD adapter in his truck. He used it for his trail cam and plugged it into his laptop. We crowded around as the folder popped open, 32 video files, all unlabeled. The thumbnails were blurry, low quality, mostly dark. Jude clicked the first one. It was just trees swaying in the wind, nothing strange. The next few were the same. Then he clicked a file named DC11. The screen lit up with night footage. The angle was low, slightly tilted. Grass in the foreground, a tent in the distance. Our tent, the blue and yellow one Cassie and Jude had been sleeping in. The camera was about 20 feet away, motionless, just watching. You could hear crickets, the occasional rustle of wind. The recording was time-stamped 2:43 a.m. And then, at the 3-minute mark, Cassie's tent zipper moved slightly. Just a twitch, maybe from the wind. But the camera didn't move. It just watched. Until the clip ended. We sat there frozen. Cassie asked if maybe we'd left it running ourselves. Maybe we were pranking each other. But the silence was different now. Thick. Jude clicked the next video. Same tent. A new angle. Closer. This time it was our tent. Mine and Sarah's. The footage was the same length. About 7 minutes. In the middle you could hear someone breathing. Not loud, but present. Too close to the mic. Then it cut out. We all backed away from the laptop. Cassie actually cursed and stepped away from the fire entirely. No one said anything for a while. Jude went through the rest of the videos, all from that same night, all shot at different times, different angles. The camera had been moved silently while we slept. It circled our tents, watched our fire pit, even zoomed in on our sleeping bags through the mesh windows. The last video was from about 4:50 a.m., just before dawn. The camera was now perched behind a bush, angled toward Jude's truck. For 5 minutes, nothing happened. Then, movement. A silhouette. Not one of us. A figure wearing a dark hoodie, crouched near the vehicle. They walked up to the camera and smiled. Their face was never fully in frame, just a jawline maybe, a glimpse of a cheek, but it was deliberate. They knew the camera was running, and then the video ended. Cassie was the first to speak. "We have to leave, now." I wanted to argue. It was our second day. We'd planned to stay until Sunday. but no one felt like staying anymore. Jude grabbed the laptop, Sarah started packing. I checked our tents. Nothing missing, but the zippers had faint dirt marks like someone had touched them with gloves. Within 30 minutes, we were in the truck and driving back down the road, passing the meadow we'd loved just the night before. But the joy was gone. The innocence was gone. None of us spoke until we hit the main road. At the first rest stop, we called the county sheriff, explained everything. They asked us to come in and hand over the camera and SD card. We did. We waited 2 hours in a lobby while they reviewed it. Finally, an officer came out and told us they'd open a file but couldn't guarantee much. The land was private, no formal campsite, no security cameras, and we hadn't actually been harmed. Could have been a trespasser, he said. Could have been a prank, or maybe a squatter passing through. That was supposed to make us feel better. It didn't. When I got home that night, I checked my phone gallery. One of the photos I took on the first day showed the edge of the tree line, just beyond our tents. I zoomed in. At first, I thought it was a trick of the shadows, but there, near the far right, behind a bush, was a shape. A leg. A boot. Half hidden. What? I stared at the screen, zooming in until the pixels broke apart. The leg in the photo wasn't in motion. It was planted, like someone had been standing completely still. I showed it to Sarah over FaceTime. Her reaction mirrored mine. "That's not one of us," she whispered. "That's definitely not one of us." The others agreed. We had proof. Even if the figure was half hidden, someone had been in those woods before we found the camera. Someone had watched us long enough to plant it, move it multiple times, and leave without being seen. The thought sat heavy in my chest. I sent the photo to the sheriff's office, attaching the time it was taken and the original image for metadata. 2 days later, they emailed back saying they'd added it to the report, but there was still no actionable lead. That was their phrase, no actionable lead. I wanted to scream. We weren't looking for a broken bike or a stolen wallet. Someone had filmed us while we slept. We could have been attacked, killed. And yet, because nothing happened beyond the footage, no laws were technically broken. At least, none they could trace without a suspect. For the next few weeks, none of us were the same. Sarah started keeping her curtains shut at all times. Cassie deleted all her social media. Jude bought a dash cam, a doorbell cam, and even a motion detector light for his apartment balcony. As for me, I became hyper-aware of everything. Faces in public, footsteps behind me, unfamiliar cars on my street. It got so bad that I temporarily moved back in with my parents. I told them I needed to save money. I didn't mention the real reason. I didn't want them to worry or think I was paranoid. But something kept gnawing at me. The camera. It wasn't expensive, it wasn't new, but the way it had been used, the specific placement, the angles, the stillness. It wasn't a first-timer. Whoever did this knew what they were doing. And the footage didn't look rushed, it looked intentional. That's what bothered me the most, not the act itself, but the calmness behind it, the confidence. So I went online and started digging, not on Reddit or YouTube, on old forums, some closed, some archived, some full of creepingly casual conversations about surveillance, field setups, and digital stalking methods. One thread stood out. A post from 3 years ago on a survivalist forum. A user had shared their strategy for documenting trespassers on their land. They explained how to set up a camera without detection, how to walk barefoot in mossy areas to avoid snapping twigs, and how to retrieve memory cards quickly without leaving prints. The tone was casual, like giving gardening tips. The username? TrailWatch34 stuck with me. Not because it was special, but because one of the video files on that SD card had the same digits, TW34_final OV. I emailed the sheriff's office again, asking if they'd noticed the final name. No response. So I dug deeper. I searched for the username on other sites and found it attached to a local classified ad platform. 3 months ago, someone using the name TrailWatch34 had listed used camping gear for sale. Boots, a knife set, a camera bag. The post had expired, but the seller's location was still visible, a rural town an hour from where we camped. It wasn't much, but it was a lead. I told Jude about it. He immediately offered to go with me. "We won't confront anyone," he said. "Just scout it out, maybe ask around." We left early on a Saturday. I didn't tell Sarah or Cassie. I wasn't proud of going behind their backs, but I also didn't want to drag them into something riskier than it already was. The town was small, maybe 5 blocks of main road, a diner, a feed store, and a general goods shop. We stopped at the diner and pretended to be passing through. The waitress, maybe in her 50s, had a sharp memory. When Jude casually mentioned the camping gear ad, she narrowed her eyes. "You talking about the guy who used to sell stuff outside the post office?" We nodded. She hesitated, then leaned in slightly. "He stopped showing up a while ago. He used to be here every other weekend. Tall guy, always wore a green flannel, didn't say much." We thanked her and stepped outside. It wasn't much to go on, but it was something. We found the post office and walked the nearby blocks, asking a few locals. Finally, a man at the feed store recognized the description. "He rents a trailer lot near the edge of town," he said. "Real quiet. Keeps to himself. Ain't seen him in weeks, though." We debated for a long time before deciding to drive by. The trailer lot was a gravel driveway with 6 or 7 mobile homes lined up unevenly. Some were clearly abandoned, others had signs of life. Bikes, lawn chairs, kids' toys. We parked across the street and waited. For nearly an hour, no one came in or out. Then, finally, a man stepped out of the 3rd trailer down, tall, wearing a faded green flannel. He walked to a shed, unlocked it, and pulled out a small duffel bag. Then he locked the shed, walked back inside, and shut the door. Jude looked at me. "That's him, isn't it?" I nodded. My hands were trembling. We didn't approach. We took a few photos from a distance, noted the trailer number, and left. As soon as we had service, I sent everything to the sheriff's office, along with the Trailcam username, the connection to the ad, and the address. It took them a full week to respond. When they did, the message was brief: "Thank you. Your information was passed to the appropriate unit. Due to the nature of the case, we cannot provide updates." I thought that would be the end of it. But 2 weeks later, Jude called me at midnight. "Turn on the news," he said. I did. A local station was reporting that an unlicensed operator had been arrested in connection with a string of voyeurism incidents across several counties. The suspect had been found in possession of over 200 hours of covert footage, mostly from remote areas, campsites, cabins, trail stops. The footage dated back at least 6 years. The report didn't show his face, but it showed his trailer, and it was the same one. They found footage of us. The case never made national headlines. There was no dramatic trial, no courtroom drama, just a brief report that the man, never named publicly, had accepted a plea deal: unlawful surveillance, trespassing, possession of illegal recording equipment. He got 3 years, with parole after 1. It didn't feel like enough, but it was something. Afterward, things slowly went back to normal. Sarah stopped jumping at shadows. Cassie eventually came back online. Jude and I drifted a little, but every once in a while we'll text about hiking or send each other safety tips. As for me, I still camp. I still love the silence of the woods. But I don't sleep without locking every zipper. I don't pitch my tent unless I've scouted every angle around it, and I never ignore the feeling that someone might be watching. Because once, someone was. And we only found out because they left the camera behind. Story 4. This happened just a few weeks before spring officially started. Right around the time when people start acting like it's warm even though it's still freezing outside. The weather had that weird in-between energy. Bright mornings, icy winds, leftover snow melting into slush. My girlfriend and I had just moved into a duplex in a quiet neighborhood outside the city. It was the kind of place where people still waved from their porches and talked about lawn fertilizer like it mattered. We didn't know many of our neighbors yet, but they seemed harmless enough. Retired couples, families, the usual suburban mix. I work remotely, mostly late hours doing freelance tech support, and Ellie, my girlfriend, works mornings at a bakery nearby. Our schedules didn't overlap much, but our routines were steady. Groceries on Sundays, trash out Tuesday night. No drama, no surprises, which is why the basket felt weird. We found it one Thursday morning. Ellie was leaving for work around 6:45 a.m. when she called me to the door. "Babe, did you see this?" she asked, pointing at the porch. Sitting right in the middle of the welcome mat was a small wicker basket wrapped in pastel pink cellophane. It looked like an early Easter gift. Inside were brightly colored candies, jelly beans, chocolate eggs, a little stuffed bunny, and a card that simply said, "Just spreading some spring joy." There was no name, no address, no company logo, nothing. Ellie thought it was cute. "Maybe it's one of those neighborhood kindness projects," she said. I wasn't so sure. We hadn't signed up for anything. No one had mentioned it, and more importantly, no one else on our street had one. I checked. I walked down the sidewalk and looked at every porch. Ours was the only one with a basket. That should have been the end of it. Toss it, ignore it, move on. But Ellie took it inside. She left the bunny on our coffee table and put the candy in a bowl on the counter. I didn't say much. It felt dumb to make a big deal about jelly beans. But the whole thing sat wrong with me. That night I stayed up late finishing a client ticket and couldn't shake the thought. Around 2:30 a.m. I decided to go back downstairs and take another look at the basket. I turned it over, checked under the plastic grass filler, and that's when I found it. Tucked between the candy wrappers, under the cardboard base, was a small black disc, about the size of a coin. No brand, no blinking light, but I knew what it was. I've worked in enough security cases to recognize a passive GPS tracker when I see one. I held it between my fingers, heart pounding, and quietly brought it back upstairs. I didn't wake Ellie. I sat at my desk, opened a toolkit app on my phone, and scanned for Bluetooth signals. Sure enough, there it was. Unnamed, unpaired, active. Someone had planted a tracker inside the basket. The next morning I showed Ellie. At first she didn't believe me. "Are you sure it's not like a promotional thing?" she asked. I shook my head. "This isn't a free sample. It's a tracker. Someone's keeping tabs on us." She looked pale. "But why? We don't even know anyone here." Exactly. We didn't know anyone. And yet, someone had chosen our porch. I reported it to the local police. The officer who took our call sounded more annoyed than alarmed. "Could be a prank," he said. "Or some marketing gimmick. Toss it and let us know if anything else shows up." I asked if they'd seen other cases like this. He said no, at least not around here. That didn't make me feel any better. We tried to brush it off, but 3 days later another basket appeared. This one came Sunday morning. Ellie opened the door to grab the paper and froze. "There's another one," she said. "Same size, same pastel wrap, but this time the card was different. It still said spreading some spring joy, but there was something handwritten beneath it. Hope you liked the last one." Ellie's face drained. "That wasn't there before, right?" I nodded slowly. "No, that's new." I opened the basket. Same filler. Same candy. But no tracker, at least not in the same place. I pulled everything out and finally found it wedged inside the stuffed bunny's back. That's when we knew it wasn't random. I called the police again. This time I asked to speak directly to the officer on duty. I gave them the new tracker along with the card and basket. They said they'd pass it along to a tech team, but didn't promise anything. If they're not threatening you, there's not much we can charge. the officer said. I asked if we could access any camera footage from nearby streets. He said that unless a crime had occurred, they wouldn't be issuing subpoenas. In other words, we were on our own. That night, I installed a ring cam on our front door. I also dug out a basic motion sensor and pointed it toward the porch. I figured if whoever was doing this came back, we'd at least get a timestamp. I didn't sleep much. Every little creak sounded like footsteps. I kept checking my phone, reviewing footage, refreshing the Bluetooth scanner. Nothing. Until Tuesday. At exactly 3:11 a.m., my phone pinged. Motion alert. I opened the app and saw the feed from our porch. A blurry figure in a hoodie stepping into frame, holding something. They crouched, set it down, stood back and waved at the camera. Then they walked off into the dark. We didn't even hear them. This time, the basket had a new message. Glad you're paying attention. I stared at the footage again and again, pausing, zooming, rewinding. The figure didn't linger. No attempt to hide. Just a slow crouch, the drop-off, and a wave. The kind of wave someone gives when they know you're watching. The hoodie masked their face too well to make out any details, and the motion sensor light only lit up after they'd already turned away. But something about the way they moved felt calculated, like this wasn't just a prank they wanted us to see. Ellie watched the clip once, then walked away without saying anything. She locked herself in the bathroom for a long time. The new tracker was exactly like the last. Round, cheap, designed to ping location data to any paired device. I scanned it. It was still alive. That meant the person who dropped it off hadn't disabled it yet. An idea hit me. I opened a Bluetooth sniffer app I used for tech work. It showed every nearby device broadcasting a signal. I checked it outside, near the porch, hoping whoever had planted it was still close. There were a few basic signals, our phones, our neighbor's Wi-Fi, but then I saw a blinking, unnamed signal with a strength reading that kept rising and falling. It was nearby, maybe within 50 feet. I didn't say anything to Ellie, she was already rattled. But I stood out on the sidewalk in front of our duplex and casually scanned the parked cars. A silver Nissan with tinted windows sat directly across the street. I couldn't see inside. I waited a few minutes, then slowly walked toward it like I was on the phone. As I approached, the Bluetooth signal peaked. Then, suddenly, the car started. I hadn't even reached the driver's side before it pulled away. No screeching tires, no rush, just a smooth, quiet departure. I stared at its taillights until they disappeared down the block. I memorized the plate. Back inside, I wrote it all down, every detail. I submitted it with the footage to a contact I had from a past client, a woman named Joanna who worked in private cyber investigations. We weren't close, but I'd fixed her laptop once and helped clean spyware from her ex's burner phone. She owed me. I sent her everything, asked her to look into the plate quietly, off the books. She replied in less than an hour. Registered to a temp LLC in a P.O. box across town. Paper trail looks intentional. Want me to dig deeper? I told her yes. In the meantime, I contacted the police again. This time I showed them the video of the wave. That seemed to shift something. The tone changed. The officer asked if we'd be willing to come in and give a full statement. We did. I explained everything, each tracker, the messages, the disappearing car. They finally opened a formal case. This could be part of a bigger pattern, one of them said. We've had a few complaints about similar baskets popping up. Different neighborhoods, same vague message. When I asked what they thought the motive was, the officer just shook his head. Sometimes people track for stalking, he said. Other times it's burglary, waiting for someone to leave town. But baskets? That's new. They kept our third tracker and promised to process it, along with the footage, but I knew the chances of a real arrest were slim. Everything was too careful, too indirect. There were no fingerprints, no DNA, no threats, and technically no crimes, at least none that would stick. That night, I told Ellie I wanted us to stay at my sister's place for a while. She agreed without hesitation. We packed lightly, took the essentials, and drove to a townhouse about 20 minutes away. My sister was out of town, so we had the place to ourselves. Clean, private, safe. Or so we thought. The next morning, I got a notification on my phone, another motion alert, from our original duplex. I checked the feed. There it was again. Another basket. Same wrapping. This one was placed more directly, almost centered in the shot like a display. The figure didn't appear this time. No wave. Just the basket. I immediately called the cops, then texted Joanna to see if she'd made progress. She replied with one sentence. I found a burner phone linked to the LLC account. Same number was used on surveillance tech forums. That caught my attention. What kind of forums? I typed back. She sent me the name, SurveilNet38, a private message board that dealt in home monitoring systems, black market GPS devices, and worst of all, user-submitted videos. Clips of people walking alone at night, sitting in cafes, sleeping in cars. Most of them were tagged Silent Watcher, Night Drop, or worse. I asked Joanna if the footage of us had ever been posted. She hadn't found anything concrete yet, but she did say the poster using the burner number had uploaded gift basket content before. They label it as tag and track, she wrote. Some kind of game, maybe. Or proof of sex, footage? I felt sick. We left the basket untouched this time. The police picked it up the next morning. No tracker this time, just a note. This one was handwritten and brief. Why'd you leave? Ellie was done. She wanted to move. Immediately. We called her cousin who lived in Colorado, packed our things within the week, and arranged for a short-term rental while we searched for something permanent. But before we left, I asked the officer in charge of our case to keep us updated, especially if the figure in the video was identified. He agreed. You're not the only ones, he added quietly. That stuck with me. A month later, long after we'd settled into a quiet apartment in Fort Collins, I got an email from Joanna. Subject line, "You were right." She'd found a second forum post from the same burner link account dated just a few days before we left town. The user had uploaded a zip folder labeled Spring Watch, 3 tags logged. Inside were still images, screen grabs from our camera footage plus 2 more. One was of our living room through the window. Another was of Ellie asleep on the couch, taken from outside. The metadata showed it had been taken 3 nights before we left. I reported it to the local police, who shared it with the original investigators. Within a week, I got a final call from the department. The man had been identified. Mid-30s, previously arrested for trespassing and harassment. No direct connection to us. They found his car parked near another house where a similar basket had been reported. When they searched his storage unit, they recovered multiple SD cards, gift wrap materials, and an entire list of names, dates, and locations. We were on it. So were 5 other addresses in 3 different counties. He was charged with stalking, criminal trespass, and unlawful surveillance. Ellie cried when I told her. I didn't cry. I just sat on the edge of the couch and stared at the wall for a long time. The scariest part wasn't that he watched us. It was that we almost didn't notice. If I hadn't found that first tracker, if I hadn't followed the signal, if we hadn't checked that footage, how long would it have continued? How many others hadn't noticed at all? We don't keep baskets anymore. Story 5. I went to college in Arizona, and up until sophomore year I was pretty reserved. I kept to myself, mostly studied in my dorm, didn't go out unless I had to. But things changed when I moved into a 4-person suite off campus with 3 other students who were all the opposite of me. Loud, outgoing, spontaneous. Somehow they dragged me out of my shell, and by spring break that year I agreed to go with them on a week-long trip to San Diego. I wasn't sure I'd fit in with the beach crowd, but I figured it was time to try. It ended up being one of the best decisions I'd made in a long time. The energy, the food, the ocean, everything felt fresh, like I'd stepped out of my routine and into someone else's life. There were 7 of us total, including a couple of people we met through mutual friends. We rented a huge Airbnb near Pacific Beach, spent our mornings getting sunburnt and our nights checking out restaurants, beach bonfires, and late-night taco stands. For once, I wasn't watching life from the sidelines. I was part of something. I felt present. It was the kind of trip people remember forever. On our second night there, one of the girls, Mel, insisted we take a group photo. The beach was practically empty at sunset, and she wanted that perfect Instagrammable shot. We set up someone's phone on a backpack, propped it with sunglasses, set the timer, and all crammed together in front of the tide. We laughed, posed, made dumb faces. Then we took another one, just to be safe. It wasn't a big deal at the time, just a tradition, something you look back on and smile. We didn't check the photos right away. The sun was setting fast and the wind picked up. Later that night, we were all hanging out in the living room of the Airbnb, playing music, half tipsy off cheap margarita mix and vodka. Mel was scrolling through her gallery when she gasped. "Guys, who the hell is that?" she asked. We all crowded around her phone. At first, I didn't see anything strange. We were all in the picture, arms slung around each other, laughing. But then I noticed what she was pointing at. Just over my left shoulder, in the blurry space between me and the tide, a man, standing several feet behind us, motionless. He wasn't part of our group. He didn't look casual either. Everyone else on the beach had been in swimsuits or shorts, but this guy was wearing a dark hoodie and jeans, hood pulled up. His face was slightly tilted down, blurry in the low light, but something about his posture felt wrong. Still. Intentional. Mel scrolled to the next photo. He wasn't there. Not at all. Just gone, like he'd never been there in the first place. The photo was taken maybe 5 seconds later. Same position, same lighting, everyone was in the same place. Except for him. We just sat there in silence, staring. "Probably just a random guy walking by," Jude said, shrugging. Maybe he realized we were taking pictures and moved out of the shot. It made sense, kind of. But the way he was standing, it didn't look like a casual stroll. He was planted there, facing our backs, just far enough not to trigger attention, but close enough to be in the shot. Ellie joked that we'd captured a ghost, but no one laughed. I remember checking the windows after that, double-checking the locks. We went on with the night, played card games, finished the drinks, but none of us mentioned the photo again. The next day, we got busy with more touristy stuff. Bike rentals, beach volleyball, a visit to that massive outdoor shopping center by the marina. It was a good day, the kind that fills your camera roll. We took dozens of photos, none of which had any strangers lingering in the background. By the end of the trip, the hoodie guy faded into the background of my thoughts. We chalked it up to weird timing, an accidental photobomb by someone passing through. When we got home, we all went back to our regular lives. Midterms, dorm drama, job shifts, the usual. A week later, Mel posted the beach photo on Instagram. She didn't mention the guy in the caption, just tagged us and added something about spring break memories. I didn't even realize she'd posted it until a few comments started popping up, not from our friends, strangers. One person wrote, "You know there's a guy behind you, right?" Another said, "Creepy photobomb, lol." A third comment just had a skull emoji and the word, "run." Mel deleted the post not long after. That's when we all got a group text from her. It was a screenshot. Someone had DM'd her the photo with a message. It read, "He's not supposed to be in there, look at the shadow." We all met up that night. It felt dramatic, sure, but none of us could let it go. We pulled up the original photo on a laptop and zoomed in. The man was grainy, yes, but the shadow comment stuck with us. So we adjusted the contrast, then the exposure. And that's when we saw it. His figure cast no shadow. Everyone else had soft silhouettes stretching with the sunset. But his feet? Nothing. Just sand. Flat. Empty. Jude said it was probably an editing glitch, maybe compression from the camera. But Ellie pointed something out that no one else had noticed. The figure wasn't in the reflection on the wet sand either. Our legs, the towels, even the bag we'd propped the phone on, all cast visible, warped reflections on the damp surface. But not him. It was like he'd been digitally inserted, but that didn't make sense. We'd taken the photo with a timer. We didn't edit anything, no filters, no Photoshop. And the image was in Mel's phone the second it was taken. No one had even touched it. We sat in silence again. Ellie finally said what we were all thinking. What if he was never supposed to be seen? What if he wasn't there to be in the photo? He was there to watch us. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the angle of the photo, the way he was positioned, just slightly behind me, almost as if he were following me specifically. The next day, I checked my own photos from the trip. Most were group shots or random selfies, but then I found one from the last night. I'd taken it out of boredom, standing on the Airbnb balcony while the others played beer pong inside. Just a quick shot of the quiet street below, palm trees and all, but in the lower corner, behind a car, was a shape, a hooded figure, again. I stared at the photo for a long time. It wasn't as clear as the beach one, but the outline was unmistakable. A person, standing behind a parked car across the street from our Airbnb, barely visible in the shadow. Same dark hoodie, same posture. I hadn't noticed it before. I remember taking that photo quickly and forgetting about it, but now, looking at it in context, it didn't feel like a coincidence. This person wasn't randomly appearing in our shots. He was around us, watching, quietly, deliberately. And somehow, no one saw him in real time, just the camera did. I texted the photo to the group. Jude replied first. "Same guy?" he asked. Mel followed with a single-word message, creepy. But it was Ellie who sent something that made my stomach drop. She replied with a screenshot of a photo she had taken the same night, this one from inside the Airbnb, showing all of us in the living room. The window in the background was mostly dark, but after increasing the brightness, we could make out a faint reflection of someone standing on the porch just outside the glass, as if looking in. Same hoodie, same figure. We had all the signs, but no idea what to do with them. There hadn't been any break-ins, no direct threats, nothing had been stolen, but this presence, this consistent shadow trailing behind us, was too much to ignore. We decided to meet again at Jude's apartment. We laid out all the images on his laptop, zooming, comparing, checking timestamps. It all pointed to the same truth. Someone had followed us during the trip. Not just once, not just in passing, but multiple times. At the beach, at the Airbnb, on the street, and possibly even closer than we realized. Mel said we should go to the police. Jude wasn't convinced they'd do anything. "What are we going to say, that a guy appeared in our photos but didn't do anything illegal?" he asked. "He didn't steal from us, didn't attack us, we have no name, no license plate, no address." But Ellie wasn't backing down. What if he's done this before, to other people? That hit a nerve. We hadn't thought about that. If this was a pattern, we might not be the first, and we might not be the last. So we went to campus security first, just to start somewhere. To their credit, the campus officers took us seriously. They reviewed the photos, asked us to submit a written statement, and promised to forward everything to the city police. They also gave us the contact of a detective who handled digital crimes and stalking cases. I called him that night. His name was Detective Kearns. He sounded exhausted but calm. He asked me to email him everything, which I did, including the raw image files and the original beach shot. He replied the next morning. One line. "You might have stumbled into something bigger. I'm checking this against an open case." 2 days passed before we heard from him again. This time, he asked to meet in person. We met him at the station that afternoon. He looked younger than I expected, mid-30s, no nonsense, dressed in a wrinkled dress shirt and vest. He laid out a few printouts on the table, surveillance footage, photos, maps. "I need you to confirm something," he said. He pointed at a grainy black and white still frame taken from a gas station camera dated 2 weeks before our trip. In it, a man in a hoodie stood beside a van, loading something into the back. The van had no visible plates. The timestamp was 3:12 IME. The figure looked just like the one from our beach photo. "This guy's been on our radar for months," Kearns said. "He doesn't break in, doesn't steal, he just follows people, watches them, takes photos from a distance. We call him the Lurker." I asked if they had a name. He shook his head. "No ID. No fingerprints, no direct contact, just images. He shows up in group photos, selfies, reflection shots, always just far enough away to avoid confrontation. Most people never even notice until later." That part hit hard. It sounded exactly like what had happened to us. "What does he want?" Ellie asked. "We don't know," Kearns said. "So far, no violence, but that doesn't mean he's harmless." That night, everything felt different. I kept thinking back to that beach photo. The smile on Mel's face, Jude's arm around Ellie, my own laugh frozen in time. It should have been a perfect memory, but now it was ruined. We all agreed to delete the photos, even the originals. Kearns had his copies. That was enough. We just wanted to move on, to forget. But moving on wasn't as easy as it sounded. A week later, Ellie texted me at 2:14, one word, "Help." I called her immediately. No answer. I grabbed my keys and drove across town faster than I should have. When I got there, she was sitting on her bedroom floor, pale, holding her phone. She pointed at her window. "He was there," she whispered. "Just now. I saw him." I walked over. The window was closed, curtains halfway drawn, but I saw it too. A faint footprint on the outside sill. It hadn't rained recently. That print had to be fresh. Ellie's voice shook. He was standing there, looking in. I saw the hoodie. We called the police. They came, searched the perimeter, took photos. No one was found. No cameras nearby had picked him up. But the footprint was real. The officers said they'd file an incident report, add it to the case. But they also said what I was dreading. Unless he breaks the law, there's not much we can do right now. Kearns followed up the next day. "This guy's careful," he said. "He doesn't touch doors, doesn't leave prints. He's obsessed with the boundary, being seen but not doing anything actionable. It was a game, and we were the unwilling players." A month later, the case finally broke. Kearns called and told me they had tracked a stolen car found in an abandoned lot, about 3 towns over. Inside they found multiple disposable phones, an old digital camera, and a duffel bag containing hard drives. One of them had folders named by date and initials. Ours was there. SB23_AZ. Inside were dozens of images, some taken from across the beach, some taken through our Airbnb windows, some from street corners. One even showed Ellie in the reflection of a restaurant window, smiling mid-bite. The camera angle made it clear. It had been taken from a car across the street. The prints were partial. The tech was untraceable, but it was enough for police to issue a statewide alert. The manhunt is still open. They haven't caught him yet, but we know his face now. We know he's real, and we're not the only ones who've seen him. The detective told us something before we left the station that day. If you hadn't caught him in that photo, we might still have nothing. You helped build the pattern. At first, that didn't feel like comfort. It felt like violation. But over time, I've come to terms with it. I don't take photos the way I used to. I check every background now, every reflection. And sometimes when I scroll back through old pictures, I wonder how many times he's been there before, just watching. Story 6. I'm not your typical weekend hiker. I'm not into climbing rocks, mapping trails, or chasing any find-yourself-in-nature vibe. I just like the quiet. I work a fast-paced job in client relations, which basically means I spend my weekdays getting yelled at by people who think the world owes them something. So when my friend Marcus suggested a spring camping trip with a few others from our college days, I agreed, reluctantly. I figured a break from the noise might be good. No reception, no alarms, just trees, a fire, and a cooler of cheap beer. We drove out on a Friday morning. 3 cars, packed with gear and snacks and way too much toilet paper. The spot Marcus found wasn't a commercial campsite. It was part of a state forest, a stretch of woods near a lake with a few designated fire rings and nothing else. No ranger post, no staff, just a parking lot at the edge and a long hike in. We set up camp about 2 miles from the trailhead, far enough to feel cut off, but close enough to hike out if the weather turned. There were 7 of us total. All mid-20s, all eager to pretend we weren't checking our phones for a signal. The first night was perfect. Clear skies. We made a fire, roasted hot dogs, argued about old stories like we hadn't already told them 100 times. The air had that crisp spring edge, where the breeze cuts just enough to make you grateful for the flames. Around midnight, most of the group started heading into tents. I stayed up with Marcus and Jen, still sipping beer, passing around a bag of chips and staring at the sky like it had secrets. That's when we heard it. The crunch of leaves. Soft, hesitant, like someone walking barefoot nearby. We all froze. Marcus turned off the lantern. We listened. More crunching, then silence. Then, a small voice. "Can someone help me?" It was faint, maybe 20 feet away. Too soft to be yelling, but too clear to be mistaken. Jen stood slowly. "Did you hear that?" Marcus and I both nodded. I stood up and called out, "Hey, who's there?" No answer. Then again, "I'm lost." It was a child's voice. We looked at each other, unsure what to do. I grabbed a flashlight and pointed it into the trees. The beam landed on something. Movement. A small figure stepped out. A kid. Maybe 7 or 8. Barefoot, wearing a light blue jacket, holding one arm like it hurt. Jen immediately ran forward. "Oh my God, are you okay?" The kid didn't cry, just nodded slowly and said, "I don't know where my mom is." I crouched beside him and asked his name. He hesitated, then whispered, "Eli." I asked where he'd come from. He didn't answer, just kept looking behind him, like someone might be following. We brought him to the fire and wrapped a blanket around him. He wasn't shaking, but his fingers were cold to the touch. I tried asking again how long he'd been out there, where he was camping, what his parents looked like, but he gave short, vague answers. Eventually, we decided to hike him out to the trailhead parking lot and call the park rangers from there. Marcus and I volunteered to take him. We figured it was safer than waiting till morning. We told the others we'd be back in an hour or 2, tops. The kid walked between us, holding Marcus's hand. He didn't talk much during the hike, just kept scanning the woods. At one point, I asked again where his campsite was, and he simply said, "They were here before, but now they're not." Something about the way he said it made the back of my neck go cold. When we reached the lot, it was empty. Our cars were there, but no other vehicles. No sign of rangers. We tried calling the non-emergency number for the county sheriff, but there was no signal, not even enough for a text. That's when Marcus remembered that just down the road, about half a mile from the lot, there was a small nature center. Closed for the season, but it had an emergency radio box mounted outside. We headed that way, Eli still walking between us, calmer now. When we reached the box, Marcus pressed the button and waited. Static. Then a voice. "Emergency dispatch. Go ahead." Marcus explained the situation. "Lost child, found near campsite, roughly 8 years old, named Eli, needs help. The dispatcher told us to stay put and that a ranger would arrive within 30 minutes. We thanked them and sat down on the bench near the trail sign. Eli leaned against me and finally seemed to relax. About 25 minutes later, a white SUV pulled up. The ranger stepped out. Tall guy, gray beard, radio on his vest. He looked at us, then at the kid. "You said his name is Eli." We nodded. He frowned. "That's strange." Marcus and I looked at each other. "Why?" I asked. "Because," the ranger said slowly, "we don't have any reports of a missing child." Marcus leaned forward, squinting at the ranger. "What do you mean there are no missing kid reports? We found him in the woods. He says he's lost." The ranger didn't move closer. He stayed by the SUV, arms folded, brow tight. "I checked dispatch before driving here. I even asked the other team on trail sweep. We've got no active reports matching your description, no missing children in this forest or in surrounding county." I looked down at Eli, still sitting quietly on the bench, still wrapped in the blanket. He didn't react, just stared straight ahead at nothing. The ranger walked a bit closer, eyes on the kid now. "Hey there, buddy, you remember your last name?" Eli shook his head. "Can you tell me where you were camping?" Another shake. "Did your parents bring you out here?" This time, no answer at all. He pulled away from me slightly, like the questions were too much. The ranger sighed and knelt in front of him. "Look, no one's in trouble. I just want to get you home, all right?" Eli blinked slowly, but didn't speak. After a moment, the ranger stood and gestured for us to step aside. "I'll take him back to the station. We'll try to get something out of him there. Maybe a school or a sibling will come up in conversation," he said quietly. "You two are good to head back." I nodded slowly, but Marcus didn't move. "Shouldn't we wait with him, make sure he's okay?" The ranger's expression didn't change. "We appreciate your help, but it's better he gets into a familiar environment. Too many new faces can overwhelm a kid." I looked at Eli again. He was staring at the dashboard of the SUV like he'd seen it before. Then he looked back at us. Just for a second, and I don't know why, but it felt like goodbye. We left the trailhead in silence, hiking back under a sky starting to lighten with early morning gray. The woods felt different now. Not peaceful, not quiet, just emptied out, like something had been removed from it but not replaced. When we returned to camp, the others were still asleep. Jen woke first and asked where we'd been. We told her everything. She stared wide-eyed, then looked around like she expected to see the boy right behind us. "You're sure they'll find his family?" she asked. "They have to," I said, though I didn't fully believe it myself. The rest of the weekend went by in a strange fog. The energy was off, everyone felt it. No one said much. When we left Sunday morning, we stopped at a diner just off the highway. While the others ordered coffee, I called the ranger station and asked to speak to someone about Eli. I gave my name, the date, and the details. The woman on the phone paused, then said, "We don't have any records under that name. Are you sure this was our jurisdiction?" I told her yes. I gave the badge number from the ranger's vest. She said they'd call back. They never did. 3 days later, I tried again. This time, a man answered. I told him the story. He was silent for a while, then asked me to hold. After a minute, he came back and said, "There's no one named Eli in our files, no ranger with the badge number you provided, and no vehicle logs from that night." I felt a strange chill move through me. "So you're saying no one came to pick him up?" "I'm saying," the man replied carefully, "there's no record of any child being found, or of any ranger responding to that call." I hung up and immediately called Marcus. He picked up fast, like he'd been expecting something. "They said there's no record," I told him, "of anything. No ranger, no kid, nothing." He didn't sound surprised. "I had a feeling," he said. "I've been thinking about it too." There was a pause. Then he said, "Check your phone, look at the photos from that night." I opened my gallery and scrolled. Campfire pictures, blurry selfies, a group shot before bed. But the one photo I was looking for, the one Jen had taken of Eli next to the fire, was gone. Deleted. Or maybe it had never saved. I checked my cloud backup. Nothing. I asked Jen if she had a copy. She swore she did, but when she looked, it was gone from her gallery too. "No way," she said. "I remember taking it. I remember showing it to you guys." Marcus was quiet. I think whoever that ranger was. He didn't work for the park. I don't think that SUV was theirs either. I didn't want to ask the question, but I did. Then who did he work for? Marcus didn't answer, just sighed into the phone like he'd already accepted that we'd never know. Over the next week, I kept searching. Forums, old news articles, lost persons pages. I couldn't find any recent reports of a missing boy named Eli, but I did find something else. A local blog written by a couple who hike remote trails and document strange encounters. One entry stood out. It was dated 7 months ago. A post about finding a child alone on a trail. The same forest, same area, a boy, quiet, no injuries, vague answers. They brought him to the ranger station, only to be told no one by that description had ever been locked. The details matched ours too closely to be chance. That was when I let it go. I didn't know who Eli was or what happened to him. Maybe he was running from something. Maybe someone was using him. Maybe it was all part of something darker we'd barely brushed against. But it was out of our hands. We tried to help. We did what we could. Some nights I still think about him, especially the way he looked at me before getting in that SUV. Not like a scared kid, more like someone who knew he was going somewhere he'd been before. Like he knew this wouldn't be the last time someone found him, and the world would forget all over again. Story 7. My name is Logan. I'm 24 now, but this story happened just 2 years ago during a spring break trip with 4 of my closest friends. I'd just graduated from community college and was working a job I hated in retail, trying to save up before transferring to a university in the fall. That break was supposed to be a last hurrah before we all scattered. We weren't the party-all-night type of group, more like long hikes, campfires, dumb road trip playlists. So when Taylor suggested we get spring passes for Cedar Ridge Canyon Park, it sounded perfect. Fresh air, no Wi-Fi, and no drama. There were 5 of us in total. Me, Taylor, Sean, Brielle, and Ava. We'd all been close since freshman year, some of us even longer. Taylor and I had been best friends since high school. We drove up in my car, a beat-up Subaru with a bad speaker and a cracked windshield, but it got us where we needed to go. The plan was simple. Spend 5 days in the canyon, hiking trails, grilling at the campsite, and maybe catching the fireworks show the park did for the spring equinox. Cedar Ridge wasn't a massive park, but it was popular that season. To keep track of attendance, they had this system where each car received spring passes for the number of people inside. The gate scanned your ID or reservation QR code and counted each person as they walked through a waist-high turnstile. They were strict about it. Taylor made the reservation online and listed all 5 of us. When we arrived at the main entrance, the ranger in the booth waved us forward after checking our confirmation number. "You're all set." 5 passes, she said, handing Taylor a plastic envelope. We parked, stretched out after the drive, and walked up to the gate. It was a nice setup. Wooden arches, digital turnstiles, rangers stationed nearby to help tourists. Each of us took a laminated pass out of the envelope and scanned it. A beep, then a green light. Ava went first, then Sean, then Brielle, then Taylor. I was last. I pulled out my pass, scanned it, and the machine flashed red. Invalid, it said. I frowned, checked the pass again, and tried again. Same result. One of the rangers came over. "That one's already been used," she said, glancing at the monitor. I told her it couldn't have been. She asked for my name, pulled up the reservation. Then she hesitated. "There are only 4 passes registered here," she said, eyebrows furrowed. "Reservation is for 4 people." Taylor stepped forward. "No, I put in 5. I literally listed all of us, first and last names." She pulled out her phone to show the confirmation email, but there was no service, no Wi-Fi either. The ranger shrugged. If you can't prove it, you'll need to purchase a single-day visitor's pass at the desk. I didn't want to cause a scene, so I stepped aside, bought the extra pass and scanned through. Everyone chalked it up to a glitch. Maybe Taylor clicked the wrong drop-down, Sean said. Whatever, you're in now. But something about it bugged me. The system wasn't new. It was automated, used at dozens of parks around the state. And Taylor was meticulous. She once emailed a hotel because the shampoo didn't match the conditioner. She wouldn't forget something like this. Still, I let it go. We were on vacation. We set up camp at a quiet site about a mile from the central lodge. 2 tents, a fire ring, a foldable table. The first day passed like it was supposed to. We hiked up a ridge, made sandwiches, played card games, and watched the stars. No stress, no tension. Everything felt normal. That night, while brushing my teeth near the tree line, I saw something strange. A flicker of movement near the trail. Just a shape. Not quite human, but tall. Like someone wearing a heavy hoodie and standing too still. I turned my flashlight toward it, but there was nothing there. Just a tree trunk. I figured my eyes were playing tricks on me. I'd been up since 5 that morning, but still. I didn't mention it. No point in creeping people out over nothing. We all turned in, 2 people in each tent, and I took the hammock. The next morning we noticed something off. Our food cooler had been unzipped and partially opened, not torn into like an animal would do, just opened, neatly. A few granola bars were gone, but nothing else. Maybe you forgot to close it, Brielle said. But I knew I hadn't even touched it the night before. It stayed zipped. We were all careful about that stuff. Bears were rare, but raccoons didn't zip things shut again. I brushed it off. Maybe one of the others got hungry during the night. No big deal. Day 2 passed uneventfully. Another hike, this time to the lake. We took photos, skipped rocks, climbed a small outcropping for the view. We asked a ranger to take a group photo at the overlook. He did us 5, all smiling, arms linked. That night we cooked over the fire, told stories, and laughed harder than I had in months. But when we got back to our tents, Ava asked the question that made us all freeze. "Hey, who took the granola bar?" Everyone looked at each other. No one answered. "I put 2 in my bag before we left," she said. "They're both gone." "Did you eat them before the hike?" Sean asked. "No, I remember putting them in my outside pocket. They're just gone." We all got quiet. Taylor checked her backpack. "My earbuds are missing," she said a moment later. "They were zipped inside this pocket." Her voice was flat, like she didn't want to sound paranoid. "You think someone came into camp?" I asked. "Like another hiker?" But the thing was, our tents were untouched. Nothing torn, no footprints, no obvious sign of entry. Whoever had taken those items had done it quietly, without waking any of us. Just like with the cooler. That night, I barely slept. I kept hearing twigs snapping outside the camp, but every time I unzipped my hammock flap, there was nothing. The fire had burned down to embers, casting long, warped shadows across the trees. I could have sworn I saw movement just beyond the tree line more than once, just flickers, but again, nothing I could prove. Around 4 a.m. I finally drifted off, and when I woke up the next morning, Taylor was already sitting by the fire, knees hugged to her chest. "I heard breathing," she said softly. "Last night, just outside my tent, but no footsteps, just breathing." We decided to check the group photo from the hike, the one the ranger had taken at the lake. Taylor pulled it up on her phone. We all huddled around her, and that's when we saw it. There were 6 people in the photo. We all leaned in closer to the screen, silent. The group photo from the lake was perfect at first glance. 5 of us in front of the overlook, arms around each other, grinning under the afternoon sun. But standing at the edge of the frame, behind Taylor's left shoulder, was a 6th person. Not someone passing by, not someone blurred mid-step. This person was standing still, dead center in the background, dressed in dark hiking clothes, hood up, head tilted slightly down so the face was just barely visible beneath the shadow. It wasn't a ranger, and it definitely wasn't one of us. Taylor zoomed in. The figure's face was partially visible, just enough to see it wasn't familiar. Male, maybe mid-20s, gaunt cheeks, sharp chin, no expression, just watching. No one had noticed him at the time. The ranger who took the photo hadn't said a word. No one remembered hearing footsteps or rustling in the trees behind us. And yet, he was right there. It could have been someone from another group, Sean said, trying to make sense of it. A solo hiker. Maybe he stopped to rest. But why didn't the gate system count him? Taylor replied. We scanned 5 passes, 1 for each of us. Brielle looked sick. What if he came in with us, somehow snuck in between us when we scanned through? I thought back to that moment, us lining up at the turnstile. Ava went first, then Sean, then Brielle, then Taylor, then me, with the rejected pass. I had assumed I was last, but the truth was I hadn't actually turned around to check. I was too busy scanning the pass and getting annoyed. I remembered a couple behind us in line, but no one standing right behind me. What if someone had slipped through right then, unnoticed? We all just sat there, the photo burning a hole in our minds. Finally, Taylor closed her phone. I don't want to talk about this at camp. Let's go into town tomorrow. We'll get real signal, check the cloud, maybe call someone. That night, no one slept well. I stayed up in the hammock, flashlight in my lap, eyes darting across the dark woods every time I heard the faintest sound. Once, around 3 a.m., I heard a soft shuffling near Brielle and Ava's tent, but when I got up to check, there was nothing, just the quiet buzz of insects and trees swaying. The next morning, we packed up early. Our plan was to drive into the nearby town, about 25 minutes out, grab coffee and Wi-Fi, and try to get to the bottom of things. When we reached the gate, the same female ranger from our check-in shift was on duty. We pulled up and Taylor leaned out the window. Hi, we think there might have been an issue with our pass count. Is there any way you can check how many people came in under our reservation? The ranger raised an eyebrow, tapped on her tablet, then frowned. Looks like 4 total scanned. Taylor shook her head. We were 5. All 5 of us walked through. Only 4 scans here, the ranger said. Maybe one person entered under a different group's code? That didn't make sense. None of us knew anyone else visiting. Is there camera footage? I asked. She hesitated. The turnstiles log each scan, but footage gets cleared every 48 hours unless flagged for review. You'd have to file a formal report to request anything deeper. We didn't say anything after that, just thanked her and kept driving. The longer this dragged out, the more it stopped feeling like a glitch and started feeling like something else. We reached the town, found a cafe with Wi-Fi and pulled up the ranger photo on a full screen. Taylor uploaded it to Google reverse image search out of desperation. Nothing came up, no matches. Brielle scrolled through other pictures from the trip, some from the hikes, some selfies, a few blurry food pics from our first meal at the park. In one, taken the morning after the gate entry, the edge of someone's shoulder was visible through the mesh of our tent. It wasn't any of us, we were all in the shot. And the clothing was unfamiliar. Dark hoodie, tan sleeve. What if he's been at our camp? Ava whispered. The stuff going missing, the breathing, that footprint outside your hammock. Sean's voice was low. We thought someone was messing with us. But what if it wasn't a prank? What if he's been watching since day 1? No one had an answer. It felt too far-fetched to believe and too detailed to ignore. We pulled up the group chat where Taylor had forwarded the park reservation email. Sure enough, the original confirmation listed 5 people, name by name. That meant the system had dropped one, either by error or because someone had tampered with it. We drove back to camp in silence. No music, no talking. When we arrived, our site looked untouched, but when we opened the tents, one thing was immediately clear. Someone had been inside. Brielle's bag had been unzipped and moved slightly. My flashlight, which I'd left in my hammock, was on the ground, batteries missing. The zipper on Taylor's sleeping bag was halfway down, even though she hadn't used it the night before. Ava found a small candy wrapper tucked into her shoe, not one of ours. We all just stood there, eyes scanning the trees. That's when Sean spotted it. Up there, he whispered, pointing up the ridge about 30 yards away. A figure, hooded, was standing behind a tree, not moving, just watching us. We all froze. "Get in the car," Taylor hissed. We didn't grab our things, just ran. Full sprint to the Subaru. I started the engine and floored it. No one looked back. We drove straight to the ranger station, stormed inside and demanded to speak to someone in charge. A uniformed officer listened as we explained everything. Missing items, altered reservation, the photo with 6 people. We showed him the image. His expression changed instantly. "You're not the first group to say something like this," he said. "Last year, another party reported a man lurking near their site, not part of the group, but by the time we got involved, he was gone. No ID, no tracks, nothing. We chalked it up to nerves or another hiker." "So what happened?" I asked. "Did you ever find him?" The ranger shook his head. "No, but he only shows up during spring break. Always at that same park entrance, always around large friend groups. We've flagged it before, but without breaking any laws, there's not much we can do." He handed us a form. "I'll file your report. We'll sweep the area again. You 5 did the right thing getting out." We all corrected him in unison. "There are 5 of us." He nodded, unfazed. "Right, 5. But the way he said it made my skin crawl, like he'd heard that before, like he was used to people needing to say it out loud. We didn't go back for our stuff. The park mailed us what they could recover, minus a few things that were unaccounted for. We never figured out who the 6th person was. Not fully. We never saw his face again, but every time I scroll through that photo, I can't help but wonder what would have happened if we hadn't noticed him. If Taylor hadn't checked the pass count. If Ava hadn't mentioned the missing bars. If we'd stayed just one more night. We haven't been back to Cedar Ridge since, and I don't think we ever will. Story 8. It was supposed to be just another small-town spring event. I was in my early 20s, still living at home while finishing my last semester of college. Every year, our town hosted a weekend-long spring fair, farmers markets, food trucks, live music, and a scavenger hunt open to anyone. Most of the time, only kids participated, but this year, the city had revamped it with a bigger prize and a more adult-friendly theme. The winner of the scavenger hunt would get $3,000, 0 cents in cash. That caught my attention, not because I was obsessed with games, but because I was broke. My best friend Nate convinced me to sign up. He was the type who jumped at every local event. Karaoke nights, weekend trivia, haunted corn mazes. I wasn't as enthusiastic. But the idea of splitting the cash if we won was enough to get me off the couch. The entry fee was free, and all we had to do was show up to the town square on Saturday morning. When we got there, I was surprised at how many people were already gathered. Some were solo, others in teams of 2 or 3. The city had clearly done a lot of promotion. Each team was handed a map, a rules sheet, and a sealed envelope marked Clue 1. We were told the scavenger hunt would include 6 clues spread across different locations in town. Each clue would lead to the next, with the final location housing a key to a locked box at the welcome tent. First team to return with the key won the cash. We were given until sunset. Simple enough. Nate was hyped from the get-go. I tried to keep my expectations low. Half of me thought we'd get stuck on Clue 2 and end up grabbing pizza instead. The first clue was straightforward, a riddle referencing the town's old clock tower. We made our way there and found a second envelope taped beneath a bench. Inside, another riddle and a small metal token. "Keep each token," the sheet said. "You'll need all 6 to win." Clue after clue took us across town. Library steps, the farmers' co-op, even the community theater where we had a creepy encounter with a prop room mannequin. Each location had the same envelope set up along with a new token. The riddles got a little harder, but we were making good progress. The sun was dipping low. By the time we reached the 5th location, a run-down greenhouse behind the high school, we were ahead of most teams. Nate was buzzing. "We've got this, man," he grinned, gripping our 5 tokens tightly. I checked the map. The 6th clue was marked near the old maintenance trail behind Hillridge Park. It was strange, though. That trail had been closed for years. Overgrown, gated off. No one ever went there anymore. Nate didn't care. "That's what makes it clever," he said. "No one else will think to go." I hesitated. What if they just used it to throw people off? But we went anyway. The trailhead gate was rusted open. No signage, no clue boxes nearby. We walked along a narrow dirt path, sidestepping thorn bushes and old fencing wire. It was eerily quiet. No birds, no wind, not even cars in the distance. I checked my phone. No signal. After 10 minutes, we found a marker. A wooden post with red paint at the base, and another envelope nailed to the side. Nate grabbed it, tore it open, and read the riddle aloud. "In the place where silence holds the ground, where footsteps vanish without sound, beneath the stone that stands alone, the final token waits unknown." We both looked around. A single moss-covered rock stood to the side of the path. Out of place. Large. Worn. Nate jogged over and crouched beside it. I stayed back, the hair on my arms standing up. Something about the air felt off, too still, too heavy. Nate started to dig underneath the rock using a stick. After a few minutes, he froze. "Dude," he called, his voice tight. "You're gonna want to see this." I walked over slowly. He'd unearthed a small metal box, but it wasn't part of the scavenger hunt. There was no logo, no ribbon, no number. The box looked old, rusted at the hinges. Nate pried it open. Inside was a plastic bag. He pulled it out and nearly dropped it. Inside the bag was a cloth napkin, stained with something dark. Blood, I realized almost instantly. Dried, but definitely blood. And tucked underneath was a photo, a printed image of someone lying on the ground, face down in the dirt. I couldn't make out the face. "What the hell is this?" Nate whispered. I felt cold all over. I scanned the trees, suddenly feeling exposed. "Put it back," I said. "Put it back and let's go." We buried the box again, not neatly, just enough to cover it and get the hell out of there. We didn't speak on the walk back. Our footsteps were loud on the trail, louder than I remembered. When we reached the car, we sat inside with the doors locked, engine off. Nate stared at the dashboard. "Do you think it was part of the game?" he asked finally. "No," I said. "There's no way. That box was old. That wasn't planted by some event team." I looked down at the envelope still in Nate's pocket. The clue led us to it. We drove straight to the police station and told them everything. They asked for the map, the clue, our exact location. A couple officers left immediately to check the trail. They kept us for a while, asking the same questions over and over. By the time we left, it was dark. We didn't hear anything for 2 days. Then a detective called me, said they found the box, said the blood had tested positive as human, said the photo was connected to an active missing person case. And no, none of it was affiliated with the town's scavenger hunt. The trail was sealed off permanently after that. They never released full details to the public, but news leaked out eventually. The man in the photo was confirmed missing the year before, a hiker last seen near that area. They believe someone buried the box months ago, maybe as a warning, or a confession, maybe both. The scavenger hunt was quietly canceled the next year. No cash prize, no riddles, no clues. Just silence. Nate and I never went to another one again. After the detective called, things moved faster than we expected. He asked us to come down to the station to give official statements, this time recorded. Nate and I sat side by side in a cramped office with flickering fluorescent lights. The detective, a tall man named Griggs, seemed calm but sharp. His questions were precise, his tone just slightly cold. He wanted to know exactly when we found the box, how long we'd had it in our possession, and if we'd seen anyone else near the trail that afternoon. We told him everything, word for word. The clue, the rock, the box. He didn't give much away in return, but when I pressed him on whether it was related to a murder, he paused. "We don't know yet," he said carefully. "But the photograph, it lines up with a missing persons case from last spring. Local man, disappeared while hiking near Hillridge Park. No leads until now." I felt a chill run down my back. Nate looked pale. "So we walked right into someone's graveyard?" he asked. Riggs shook his head. "Not quite, but you definitely stumbled into something that wasn't meant to be found during a scavenger hunt." That last part stuck with me. After our interviews, we were allowed to leave, but not without a warning. "If you remember anything else," Griggs said, "even something small, call me directly. Don't talk to anyone else about the box, not your friends, not social media, understood?" We nodded, silently. Outside the station, Nate finally spoke. "What if someone knew the scavenger hunt was happening and planted the clue to lead us there?" I hadn't thought of that, but it made a sick kind of sense. The first 5 clues were normal, fun, clever, harmless. Only the 6th was off. The paint, the riddle, the location. It didn't belong. We reached out to the town's Parks and Events office the next day, asked to speak with whoever had written or coordinated the scavenger hunt. The woman who answered was polite but confused. There were only 5 clues, she said. The 6th token was available at the community center once all 5 were collected. That was always the plan. I asked her again. She was firm. 5 total. No clues were placed near Hillridge. "That trail is off limits." Nate and I just looked at each other. "Someone hijacked the game," he muttered. "Planted their own final clue." We called Griggs that afternoon and told him what she said. He didn't sound surprised. "That confirms it then," he said. "That 6th clue wasn't part of the event, someone added it in. Which means someone wanted you to find that box." His words hit me harder than I expected. This wasn't a twisted accident. This was intentional. We were lured there, used. Someone had woven their own clue into a public game, counting on someone to stumble into something dark, something buried, and it just happened to be us. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound outside made me sit up. Every creak of the floorboards or car passing outside made me think someone was watching. I kept picturing the photo, the way the man was face down, arms awkwardly sprawled, like he hadn't fallen naturally, like he'd been placed. I could still smell the faint metallic scent from that cloth napkin. I wanted to forget it, but I couldn't. The box had been too deliberate. The fact that it hadn't been buried deep told me something else. Whoever put it there wanted it to be found. A week passed. Nate and I kept our heads down. No one else in town seemed to know what had happened. The scavenger hunt prize was quietly handed out to another team, and the local newspaper made no mention of our discovery. But Griggs kept in touch. "We identified the man," he told me one day. "Name's Darren Morrow, 34, lived 2 towns over. Wife reported him missing after he went on a weekend hike and never came back." I asked if they had any suspects. "Not yet, but we're digging into his contacts, bank records, travel history." Then he added something I wasn't ready for. "Your name came up." I blinked. "What? Mine? Why?" Griggs paused. "Because 2 weeks before he disappeared, Darren purchased a raffle ticket from a fundraising booth. The vendor listed you as the volunteer on duty that day. I remembered the fundraiser. It was for our community center, selling raffle tickets and baked goods. I was there for half a shift, maybe 3 hours. "You think I knew him?" I asked. "Not necessarily," Griggs said, "but it's a link. Maybe that's how he ended up near Hillridge in the first place." Or maybe someone used your name. We're not ruling anything out. The next morning, Nate called. He sounded shaken. "I found something in my mailbox," he said. "No stamp, no return address, just a note." He read it aloud. There was supposed to be silence. "Why did you dig?" "I told him to call the police. He already had. An officer came by, took the note, dusted it for prints. Nothing. Just like the box. I checked my own mailbox after that, nothing there, no notes." But the paranoia returned. Whoever had left that clue, whoever had placed that box, was still around, watching, waiting. The investigation stretched out over weeks. They questioned Darren's family, co-workers, even a former hiking buddy who'd gotten into an argument with him over money. But nothing stuck. His phone had been turned off days before his disappearance. No financial activity after the day he vanished. It was like he walked into the woods and never came back. Until we found that box. Eventually, Griggs told us they were closing the public inquiry. "No active leads. We're labeling it a cold case unless new information comes up." I asked what happened to the box. He hesitated. "Evidence storage. For now." After that, life moved on. Kind of. Nate and I drifted a bit. Not intentionally. We just stopped going to events, stopped walking through the park, stopped acting like that spring break hadn't changed everything. I still catch myself flinching at rustling sounds. I still scan every public board for strange riddles. I still double-check if someone's following me. Whoever wrote that sixth clue, they were careful, precise, patient. The police couldn't find them, but they knew us. They knew our routines, our town, our event. And for some reason, they picked us to find what they left behind. Sometimes I wonder if there were other boxes, other clues, other games hidden beneath the surface of small towns just like ours. I don't go near scavenger hunts anymore, and I don't walk unmarked trails. Because spring is supposed to be harmless, fun, bright. And now, whenever that season rolls around again, all I can think about is a rusted metal box under a rock and a trail that was never on the map, a game we were never meant to win. Story 9. A couple of years ago, I was working part-time at a dental office while studying for my licensing exam. Life was repetitive but manageable. Early mornings, polite small talk, late nights with textbooks I barely understood. Weekends were sacred. I'd spend them catching up on errands or sitting on the balcony with my best friend and roommate, Paige, sipping coffee and pretending we were older, more put-together versions of ourselves. That spring, she came up with the idea to take a wildflower hike on the edge of town. "It'll get you out of your study hole," she said. "You need fresh air." I wasn't really a nature girl, but I liked the idea of doing something spontaneous. Besides, I trusted Paige's judgment. She found a spot called Greystone Hollow, just over an hour away. Not a well-known park, more of a locally kept secret according to a trail blog. The pictures looked beautiful. Rolling fields, waist-high purple and yellow flowers, a viewpoint that overlooked the entire valley. We decided to drive up early Saturday morning and make a day of it. No pressure, no phones, just sunshine and space to breathe. It sounded like the perfect way to reset. We got there a little after 9 a.m. The entrance was barely marked, just a faded wooden sign nailed to a split-rail fence. There were only 2 cars in the gravel lot. I remember that specifically because Paige joked, "Looks like we have the whole place to ourselves." I smiled, but something about the quiet unsettled me. No bird song, no bugs, just stillness. The trail was narrow but clear, winding through tree-lined paths before opening into long patches of wildflowers. Paige was in her element, snapping photos, crouching to examine petals. I mostly stayed on the trail, breathing in the warm, dry air. After about an hour, we reached a fork. One side led to the viewpoint. The other went downhill toward what the sign labeled as Lower Meadow Loop. We debated for a second, but chose the loop. "Less people means more flowers," Paige grinned. We started down the path, and the wildflowers became thicker. Tall bluebonnets, clusters of poppies, patches of grass that danced with every breeze. It was beautiful, yes, but also strangely unkempt. There were no benches, no markers. Just plants and dirt and a trail that seemed to narrow the farther we walked. I started to feel like we were deeper than we meant to be. We found the first one about 10 minutes later. It was Paige who noticed it. She stopped walking and pointed off trail. "That's weird, right?" she said. At first I didn't see it. Then she stepped forward, parting the tall grass. It was a patch of disturbed earth about 4 feet long, 2 feet wide, slightly sunken like it had settled. The surrounding grass had been flattened, and you could see claw marks in the dirt where someone had hastily covered it. "Animal?" I asked, but I already knew it wasn't. Animals don't dig rectangular plots. Paige didn't answer. She just looked at me, and I knew she was thinking the same thing. We backed up. Carefully, quietly. I took a photo, just in case. "Let's go back to the fork," I said. Paige nodded. But we didn't make it 20 feet before we saw another one, and then another. Each one was the same. Rectangular, shallow, barely covered. Some had small rocks placed at the head. One had a piece of torn cloth half buried in the dirt. A shirt sleeve, I think. I stopped counting after 5. We weren't in a meadow. We were in a field of graves. My throat went dry. Paige whispered, "This isn't right. We need to call someone." I pulled out my phone. No signal. Paige checked hers. Nothing. "We'll have to hike back up," she said. "Get to the car, call the sheriff." We turned around, and that's when we heard the sound. A low creak, like wood shifting, followed by a thump. Not close, but not far. Maybe somewhere downhill? Paige froze. I scanned the trees. Nothing moved, but I swear I could feel something shift behind them. Like someone watching. I whispered, "Run." We didn't argue, we just turned and ran. The hike back felt 3 times as long. I kept imagining someone behind us. Paige tripped once, scraped her knee, but we didn't stop. When we finally reached the fork, we didn't pause, just kept running until we reached the clearing again. The parking lot came into view, and that's when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. One of the 2 cars was gone. Ours was still there. The other? Someone was down there with us, I muttered. Someone left. Paige was already dialing. Her phone had signal again. She called the local sheriff's office and tried to explain what we'd seen. We waited in the car, doors locked, eyes glued to the trail entrance. I kept expecting someone to come out, a figure, a shovel, anything. But no one did. 20 minutes later, a deputy showed up. We walked him back to the graves, slowly, carefully. The man didn't say much, but the moment he saw the 3rd disturbed plot, his jaw tensed. He told us to go wait at the entrance, that he was calling in backup. We left without arguing. 2 unmarked trucks arrived a half-hour later. Crime scene tape. Markers, shovels. We sat in the car for what felt like hours, giving statements, describing what we'd seen. They asked for our photos. I showed them the one I took. Paige handed hers over. One of the investigators took our information and told us to expect a follow-up call. "Don't talk to the media," he said, "and if anyone contacts you directly about this, let us know immediately." That sentence stuck with me. We drove home in silence. We didn't talk much for the rest of that weekend. I kept checking the news, but there was nothing. No headlines, no updates, just silence. The silence from the news didn't make sense. Paige and I kept checking every day. Local outlets, regional stations, even Reddit threads and hiking forums. But there wasn't a single mention of Greystone Hollow. No reports, no investigation underway, nothing. We weren't expecting a headline that screamed "Local girls discover mass grave," but we figured something would show up. A brief, a blurb, anything. But a week passed and the world outside stayed quiet. It was like what we'd seen had never happened. Paige even started to wonder if we'd imagined it. "I mean, we know it happened," she'd say, "but what if someone's covering it?" 2 weeks later, I got a call from a blocked number, a man's voice, calm, professional, but firm. "Miss Carver?" I said yes. "This is Agent Nolan with the State Investigative Division. We're reviewing evidence tied to your report from Greystone Hollow. Are you free to speak?" I said yes again. He asked if I'd taken photos. I told him I'd already handed one over. "Did you share it with anyone else?" he asked. I told him no. He thanked me for my cooperation and said the case was still active but sensitive. Before I could ask anything, he hung up. I called Paige immediately. She hadn't gotten a call, but later that night she found something under her windshield wiper. An unmarked envelope, no return address, no stamp. Inside was a single printed photo, a zoomed-in image of the trailhead sign at Greystone Hollow. Underneath, typed in all caps, were the words, "Trails are closed for a reason." We took it to the sheriff's department the next morning. The front desk officer logged the photo, wrote a note, and told us someone would follow up. But no one ever did. It was the last time we got anything close to official communication. After that, Paige didn't want to talk about it anymore. She started sleeping with her window locked and her keys by her bed. I understood. I felt the same paranoia. Walking faster to my car at night, watching strangers a little too closely, checking my phone twice every time it buzzed. It wasn't just the graves, it was the quiet that followed. That weird, deliberate silence, like something should have happened and didn't. That silence felt louder than any headline would have. 3 months passed. The weather changed. Classes picked up. Life slowly resumed, but something about both of us had shifted. One day I noticed Paige hadn't gone on a single hike since, not even her morning walks. "I'm just busy," she said. But I knew it wasn't that. One night, while she was sleeping, I pulled out my laptop and went back to the trail blog where she'd originally found Greystone Hollow, the post that had listed the wildflower loop. But the page was gone. Not just the article, the whole site. Domain not found? I searched its name, the author, even archived versions. Nothing. I tried digging deeper, using cached URLs, old forum links, Google images. The only result that came up was a warning thread from a backcountry Reddit group, a post titled, "Places that aren't on maps anymore." Greystone Hollow was on the list. One comment in particular caught my eye. "Don't let the name fool you. It hasn't been a flower trail in a long time. No username, deleted account. Just a breadcrumb that led nowhere." That's when I decided to go back. I didn't tell Paige. I didn't even plan it, really. I just drove out one Sunday, late morning. A mix of curiosity and something else I couldn't explain. Obsession, maybe. I needed to know that it was still there, that we hadn't imagined it. The lot was empty when I arrived. The wooden sign had been torn down, not knocked over, removed. The post was still there, but the board had been stripped. Someone had gone out of their way to erase it. The trail was overgrown, but still there if you knew where to look. I followed it. The first few minutes were uneventful. Same twisting trees, same crunch of dirt underfoot. But the meadow was different now. All the wildflowers were gone, not wilted. Gone. The field had been flattened, like it had been stomped out by machines. I walked farther in, toward the lower loop. My breath grew shallow with every step. My skin itched. The air had that unnatural stillness again. When I reached the area where we'd found the grave, there was nothing. No sunken patches, no disturbed dirt, no rocks, just flat ground and dry weeds. Someone had cleaned it, not covered it. Scrubbed it. I took out my phone and snapped a few pictures anyway. I didn't know what I expected to find. There were no clues, no footprints, just an overwhelming feeling that I shouldn't be there, that whatever we'd uncovered had been handled and that if I stayed too long, I'd become part of it. I turned around and walked quickly back to the car. On the way out of town, I stopped at a gas station. I paid for a water and made conversation with the cashier. I asked casually if they'd ever heard of Greystone Hollow. He paused, then said, "You're not from around here, are you?" I shook my head. He gave me a long look. People used to hike there, until something happened. Few years back, after that, most folks left it alone. I asked what happened. He didn't answer right away. "Don't think I'm supposed to talk about it," he finally said. "But if you're smart, you won't go back." I asked one more question, if anyone had ever gone missing there. He just looked at me for a few seconds and said, "Some things don't get reported. Doesn't mean they didn't happen." I didn't press him. I went home. I backed up the photos I'd taken. Then I deleted them from my phone. That night, I sat with Paige on the balcony. We hadn't talked about Greystone in weeks, maybe months. I asked her if she still thought about it. She didn't answer at first. Then she said, "Not during the day." I nodded. I told her I'd gone back. She didn't look at me. "Did you see them?" she asked. I shook my head. "They're gone. It's like nothing was ever there." Her eyes didn't change. "They were real," she whispered. "We both know that." I didn't argue, because she was right, and because we weren't supposed to find them in the first place. We still don't know who buried them. We don't know if they were ever identified, or if someone buried them with the intention of hiding them forever, or sending a message. But I do know this. Whoever left those graves didn't want them found, and someone out there made sure they disappeared again. Which story setting scared you the most? Let me know in the comments. Hey everyone, thanks for listening. If you stuck around until the end, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and click the notification bell so you never miss a new episode. As always, I'm looking for more story ideas, so drop a comment below with any themes or experiences you'd like to hear next. Stay safe out there, and until next time, keep your eyes open.